Did you see this new Consumer Reports article that nearly broke the internet? This article is making big news in the wellness community about concerning levels of lead, that's a neurotoxin, in protein powders. Now, this is a serious claim and it has a lot of people looking at their protein powders with side eyes. In this video, we're going to address if you should be concerned about lead in protein powder. Let's take a look at the report. Consumer Reports tested 23 protein powders and ready-to-drink protein shakes from popular brands. They even go as far as to say, we advise against the daily use of most protein powders since many have high levels of heavy metals and none are necessary to hit your daily protein goals. Wait a minute. I know that my gym bros and my wellness girlies are turning over in their pump covers right now. This is some scary business considering that so many people do rely on protein powders to hit their protein goals. Not to mention, we are being absolutely bombarded by the protein health halo.
The most important macronutrient is protein.
It's protein.
It is essential.
This is how much protein you should be eating every day.
Making sure that you get 30 or so grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking.
It seems like everywhere you turn, health experts are talking about protein. If I see one more healthy, high protein dessert recipe,
I'm gonna lose my freaking mind!
Some people think that part of the so-called protein boom could have something to do with the rising popularity of GLP-1 drugs, because these drugs are designed to mimic that fullness feeling you get from eating enough protein. In case you didn't know, our bodies make GLP-1, this mystical, magical, miracle weight loss molecule. This mystical, magical, miracle weight loss molecule. So yes, by simply eating enough satiating foods like protein, you can increase GLP-1. But it is not just protein. Fiber also increases GLP-1. So people who are taking GLP-1 drugs are artificially inducing this fullness effect that you get from eating enough protein, which causes them to have less of an appetite and as a result consume fewer calories and as a result lose weight. Because dietary protein and strength training are so important for building and preserving lean muscle, which, by the way, accounts for between 40 and 60% of the weight lost on these GLP-1 drugs, Big Food has made a major pivot to where the future of weight loss is headed and have started cranking out processed protein products with glorified high protein marketing buzzwords. That's one reason why we're seeing this mega boom in the sales of protein powders, drinks, and supplements. I'm even seeing protein in Pop-Tarts and popcorn, which honestly just feels wrong. I had a friend send me a picture of high protein marinara sauce. Really? I've even seen protein powder for coffee. Hang on. I love my coffee, but do I need to put protein powder in my coffee to get gains? No. If these processed protein powders are coming with lead, do we really want it? And is lead the only thing that we should be concerned about when it comes to protein powders? I'm just gonna come out and say it right now. No, there is something else that you should be caring about that this Consumer Reports article totally missed. So keep watching and we'll get into that in a little bit. Let's take a look at the 3 big claims I saw this Consumer Reports article make. Claim number 1. For more than 2/3 of the products analyzed, Consumer Reports found that a single serving contained more lead than their food safety experts say is safe to consume in a day. Some by more than 10 times that. Claim number 2, plant-based protein powders had the highest amount of lead levels present out of all of the sources of protein powder tested. What? I thought that plant-based protein powders were way better than whey. Claim number 3, the FDA doesn't have established enforceable limits of lead in food and supplements. Oh yeah, we're going there. But I think something really important we need to cover first is why are we so concerned about lead? Okay, We all know that kid who used to stab themselves with pencils just to see if they would get lead poisoning. Maybe that kid was you. It was me, I'm not gonna lie. I tried it. And while I didn't have any major symptoms, repeated lead exposure over time can be problematic, especially pregnant and breastfeeding women or young children. Why is lead so problematic? Well, it can damage the developing brain and nervous system, cause neurological issues, learning delays, and behavioral problems like ADHD. In fact, lead exposure significantly affects IQ in children, with even very low levels linked to lower IQ and cognitive decline. Maybe now it's all starting to make sense, that kid who stabbed themselves with a pencil, even if it was you. Studies show that as blood lead levels increase, children can lose between 3.9 and 7.4 IQ points. Yikes! Now, chronic exposure to lead over time through things like old lead paint, drinking water that travels through rusty old lead pipes, or poor air quality if you live in a city or somewhere near a highway with a lot of traffic. Over time, chronic exposure to lead can suppress your immune system, it can disrupt your gut microbiome, lower sperm count, damage the kidneys, heart, and even cause high blood pressure, stroke, and increased risk for dementia. So you can imagine something like protein powder that people are consuming every day, and for some people who are trying to get extra yolk multiple times a day, can cause a buildup of lead exposure over time, which can definitely increase the risk of these health issues. Now let's dig a little bit deeper into the three big claims. Claim number one: for more than 2/3 of the products analyzed, a single serving contained more lead than the Consumer Reports food safety experts say is considered safe to consume in a day. 70% of the products tested contain over 120% of Consumer Reports' level of concern for lead. So the next question is, what was Consumer Reports' level of concern? 0.5 micrograms of lead exposure per day. This is a very strict and conservative guideline set by California Prop 65, the law requiring businesses to warn Californians about exposure to chemicals that could potentially cause harm. Now, let's talk about the products. Which ones tested the highest for lead? Naked Nutrition's mass gainers contain 7.7 micrograms of lead per serving, or roughly 1,570% of Consumer Reports' level of concern. And Huel's Black Edition protein powder contained 6.5 micrograms of lead, or 1,290% of Consumer Reports' daily lead limit. Runners up for most lead were Garden of Life's Sport Organic plant-based protein and Momentous 100% plant protein powder, which tested between 400 and 600% of Consumer Reports' level of concern. These were the protein powders that Consumer Reports said were okay to eat occasionally due to their lower lead levels. But the question is, how concerned should we really be? I think it's first important to note that there's no safe level of lead exposure, but it's also worth mentioning that the California Prop 65 standards of 0.5 micrograms of lead exposure per day are extremely conservative. To put this into perspective, the FDA has something called an interim reference level for levels of daily lead exposure that are not associated with harm. 2.2 micrograms for children, 8.8 micrograms for women of childbearing age, and the FDA gets this number from scientific studies that link blood levels of lead to adverse health outcomes. Then they take that number and apply a 10x safety factor, which essentially sets a threshold of exposure that's 10 times lower than what is known to cause harm. Claim number two: plant-based protein powders had the highest amount of lead levels present out of all of the sources of protein powder tested. According to the Consumer Reports article, the lead levels in plant-based products were, on average, 9 times the amount found in those made with dairy proteins like whey, but half of the products we tested still had high enough levels of contamination that Consumer Reports experts advise against daily use. So, try telling that to my protein bros and my wellness sisters who are getting after it. They're not trying to miss that catabolic window, and I don't think anyone besides maybe Jordan from Love is Blind is blending boiled chicken and Crystal Light to get that protein in. So why did plant-based protein powders test the highest for lead? Well, it's because plants are like Earth's living filters, and they can't necessarily tell the difference between good minerals like magnesium or zinc and toxic metals like lead, arsenic, or cadmium. And unfortunately, peas, rice, and hemp, which make up a lot of the plant-based protein powders on the market, tend to accumulate the highest amounts. Now, on the other hand, whey comes from milk, an animal-derived protein, meaning it's one step removed from the soil and therefore has less direct exposure to lead. So, from a heavy metal standpoint, whey might be a cleaner, safer option. Not to mention, the gains are also greater. But before we move on here, it's definitely worth mentioning that many healthy whole foods actually contain lead at levels by which, according to this report, would be considered toxic. For example, spinach contains 0.5 micrograms of lead per serving, asparagus contains 0.8 micrograms of lead per serving, avocados contain 0.9 micrograms of lead per serving, and strawberries contain 2.2 micrograms of lead per serving. And think about it, if you go to cook spinach, most of us are using more than a serving, which is a half a cup. That's literally like this much spinach. So a lot of us are having more than one serving of these foods per day. And would I tell you to avoid eating plant foods due to their lead content? No way! Because you're also getting fiber, folate, and minerals like magnesium, copper, iron, and zinc. In fact, a diet rich in fiber can actually help bind to and detoxify heavy metals from the body. And finally, claim number 3, the FDA doesn't have established enforceable limits of lead in food and supplements. So we just talked about the fact that the FDA does have something called an interim reference level, or IRL for short. It's established to help the FDA evaluate risk, but at the current moment, it's not legally enforceable. And that's where things start to get tricky. So when you're looking for a protein powder, it's worth doing a little bit of research ahead of time. You should be looking out for protein powders that are third-party tested. If a supplement company has one, they will proudly state it on the bottle or on their website. And while you are on the website, make sure you look for the published certificate of analysis. This is a gold standard. It shows batch-specific test results for heavy metals and other contaminants. And finally, you should look for a certification from quality testing agencies like Consumer Labs, Clean Label Project, NSF, or USP. There are a few protein powders that I've come across that actually meet these standards. For plant-based protein powders, you have Truvani, Designs for Health. For animal-based protein powders, look for single ingredient protein sources like whey, bone broth protein isolate, or grass-fed beef protein isolate. Some brands, Thorne, Momentous, whey protein, Paleovalley, and Equip Prime protein. All right, finally, let's get to my biggest gripe with this Consumer Reports article. They don't account for the quality of ingredients in the protein powders. Yes, heavy metals are extremely important, but a protein powder can test low in lead and still contain junk ingredients. So you also want to make sure your protein powder is not loaded with gums, emulsifiers, added sugars, or artificial flavors and sweeteners like sucralose, aspartame, or acesulfame K. So let me just give you an example. The Consumer Reports article recommended Optimum Nutrition Double Rich Chocolate Whey Protein Powder because it tested very low for lead. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you see that the Consumer Reports article did not pay any attention to the quality of ingredients in this protein powder, and they are particularly concerning. They have acesulfame K, which is an artificial sweetener that's linked to gut microbiome disruption, cardiovascular issues, increased risk for cancer, and the other protein powder supplements that they recommended for low levels of lead really aren't any better. Some contain polydextrose, sunflower oil, corn syrup solids, maltodextrin, sucralose. I mean, these are all among the lowest quality, most inflammatory, and highly processed ingredients that I have ever seen in a protein powder. Yeah, it's not just about lead. You really, really need to be paying attention to the quality of ingredients in your protein powder and looking for those that are naturally sweetened with monk fruit or stevia and that don't contain a laundry list of junk ingredients. So, should you be concerned about lead in protein powder? Honestly, I don't think so. When this Consumer Reports article came out, I was scared, just like you probably if you're watching this video. I use protein powder. I recommend it to my clients, to my friends, to my family to help them reach their protein goals. But I think this article really just serves as a good reminder that awareness is key. What matters most is that we're paying attention and reducing our total exposure to lead where possible, especially in supplements and protein powders. And if we do choose a supplement, to pick a brand that third-party tests, because there are really good options out there. You just have to do a little bit of research. Knowledge is power, and that is the reason that I wanted to do this video, is to help you cut through the confusion around food so you can feel more connected, empowered, and happy about food again. Please, if you got something out of this video, share it with a friend, like, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.